Hi, this is Mark Scott with Closer Than You Think. Thanks for joining us today here on Substack. And I have a special guest here with me today. I'm really excited about this one. And this is Lindsay. Lindsay, do you want to say hi?
Good morning. Hello, everyone.
All right, perfect. Lindsay is in her mid-20s, and it's going to give me another opportunity to hear from somebody about this whole idea of voice. We're talking about the idea of voice, how you find your voice, how people go through that process. I will say up front that I do believe there's a spiritual element to this in the terms of God speaks to us and through us, and that's going to be something we come to at the end. And you'll have a chance to agree or disagree with that as we go along in this conversation. But I wanted to start with this quote. This quote is from Margaret Wheatley, and it says, "I believe we can change the world if we start listening to one another again. Simple, honest human conversation. Simple, truthful conversation where we each have a chance to speak, we each feel heard, and we each listen well." So my whole goal right here is to take a listening, learning posture. And you're kind of the sage here. You're going to share your wisdom with us and all that good stuff. So are you ready?
Ready.
All right. I just want to start by just asking you about this idea of voice. Do you hear that phrase, like people finding their voice? Do you hear that often? Is it something that, but when you hear that phrase, what do you think of?
So I personally, I think, have always been like very opinionated, very vocal, very like loud about those things. And that's kind of what I think about is like I am not typically like afraid to share that kind of thing. But in the context of like religion and politics, my parents always said, like, we don't talk religion and politics. Their parents were both very religious. And so that kind of turned them off from like the conversations, I think. And for that reason, that was something that I actually never really had a lot of opinions on until adulthood, really. And I had to like kind of start figuring things out on my own, which I still am. But in like all other aspects of my life, I think I'm very vocal. And I think, what does it mean to have a voice? You are, you know what you believe, you're strong in those beliefs and steadfast and kind of don't waver from that. Or if you do, then it's like that's when you start to like kind of question those things.
Hmm.
And so voice, I don't know,
So,
finding your voice. I feel like people say that a lot whenever there's like internal conflict or
yeah.
even external conflict. I feel like I hear that a lot in like relationships, being like mid-20s, like you want to stand up for what you believe in and have individuality and not like completely converge with like really like romantic or friendships or whatever, like have that individuality in relationships. And or even in like bad situations, I think a lot of like you hear it from girls who are with guys that kind of put them down. And it's like, find your voice and stand up for yourself.
Yeah, yeah. Well, that kind of, okay. So a couple of things that you brought up there. One, so do you see that quite a bit, like playing out in relationships? Because one of my questions is there like a healthy way to go about finding your voice and an unhealthy way? And what do you think factors into that? Especially with people your age, like what are you seeing? I don't want to put you on the spot, and I certainly don't want you to like say, well, my friend so-and-so did this,
Yeah, no.
um, but do you get the idea of like, are there ways, basically your journey too, like the process you're going through? Have there been times where you're like, yeah, I'm able to kind of exert who I am, express myself in a healthy way, and then sometimes there's unhealthy factors that are forcing you to maybe go a certain direction, whether it's expressing yourself or withholding
Mhm.
um, your voice. Does that
uh,
question make sense?
yeah, there's a couple components there, I think.
Yeah.
I know I like have a notepad here, so I kind of write down things as I think of them, because I also am like the type that if I don't say it, then I'll like go off on a track and then I will forget everything else
Yeah.
that we just talked about. Okay, but finding your voice, I guess, in a relationship and like how that comes about. I think it's important to kind of know what you stand for before entering that relationship and know what you think, because whenever you're trying to figure it out in the like with the lens of someone else, then you're trying to kind of like conform and make them fit into your life, and like there's less of like that individuality focus, I think. And then what was the second part of the question?
Sorry, you kind of are getting into it. I think the question was just the distinction between healthy and unhealthy ways to go about it, where they're unhealthy factors. But
yeah, I think also it depends on, two people in a relationship, the other person, and how they, whether they're open or not to you having that individuality. And a lot of times people don't, I think, want that. They want to integrate like you into their life in the way that it fits for them, where that's where I think a lot of people can get lost and lose their voice, so to say, is that they're trying to fit a mold or fit into someone else's story, instead of saying, okay, this is what I think and what I believe and how I feel and what I want. And then this is how you think and feel and want and believe. And then making those two fit together, as opposed to like trying to say, this is what you want, so this is what I'm going to be,
Yeah. And the reason this topic is something I want to talk to people about is because I think it is where you have to balance two things. Like, I love what you're saying about, you really need to be kind of have your own beliefs, your own convictions, your own values, kind of going into relationships, going into interactions with other people. So those things are kind of set. And yet at the same time, be open-minded and be curious to the fact that people can still help shape you and change something. You might change your beliefs over time, because that's something that I've done through my lifetime. And so that's one of the reasons I want to talk to people about this, is like, how do you do those two things where you hold convictions and values and still kind of let other people influence you and shape you in healthy ways, and it's interesting what you said about like kind of your own individuality going into a relationship, because I have two daughters, and they're a little bit younger than you, but one of my messages and one of my hopes for them is that, you figure out kind of what it means to be a woman. You kind of figure out what it means to be you apart from a relationship, so that when you go into the relationship, you know that part, like, who you are. Like, in high school, you see a lot of people that are so intertwined with somebody else that you'll see a lot of people, for example, they break up, get back together, break up, get back together, things like that. And it's kind of like they're breaking up with themselves in a way. Like there's this identity issue, and that individuality part hasn't really been shaped yet. I'm going off on a tangent and I'm doing more talking than I need to. So good thoughts that you've said so far. I'm curious, you said you were vocal and opinionated, and as you were, well, I guess all throughout life, but as you were growing up and stuff, do you have any examples, not to put you on the spot, but of things that you were kind of vocal about, since it wasn't religion or politics?
I don't know if I have a specific example, but like whenever my boyfriend and I started dating, I asked him, okay, like what was like, if somebody had asked you about me in high school, like what would you have told them? And his answer was, she takes no shit. Like that girl, like she's 100% herself, and just that's who she's going to be. And it doesn't matter, like she's not going to be something for someone else, I guess. And that is, I don't know if I have a specific example of like going against the grain, but like if like I also am very like, I'm kind of a black and white person to an extent. And also just like not, what's the word I want to use here? Um, I don't know. I think so, like in Bluebells, for example, I I'm like a very efficiency mindset kind of person, like very logical, and like there's the best way to do something, and I think if we're not doing it the best way, then like why are we doing it, you
Mm.
know?
Hmm.
And in some ways, like if you're going to do something right, or do it right the first time, sort
Yeah,
of thing.
yeah.
And so if there was something that like, and it wasn't like that I was just totally like going against the grain and saying we shouldn't do it this way, or this is the way it should be done, or whatever, because like, I don't know how to run a dance team, but I don't know, it was just like things that didn't make sense, or in life, in work, in anything, if it doesn't make sense, then to me
Why are we
it's
doing
hard
it?
to like kind of stand behind it,
Right. Yeah.
very logical person.
Yeah. Yeah.
So that actually is like one thing. Like I got on a little bit of on a cliff yesterday at work because I was asked to do something that just didn't make sense to me, and I'm like, this, I have to like completely redact what I put in writing 4 months ago, but there's no logical way for me to spin this so that it's what you want. And it was a challenge, but it was just short and concise. And also, truth is the most, I think, important thing to me. And so that's where I also am like a little bit black and white, a little bit like focused, or a lot focused on what makes sense and what's logical. And I'm like, I cannot write this and have it be true when I wrote this 4 months ago. And
Yeah.
okay, yes, things do change, but this was something that like, we were saying 4 months ago, this is what
Yeah.
it is, the
Yeah.
truth. And now I'm being asked to completely,
Yeah.
redact those statements. And honestly, my name wasn't signed to it, but it was a challenge for me. And I just kept it very concise because that's, the most truth that I could tell was 4 or 5 sentences
Yeah.
about it. And, my boss said, perfect. So, she liked it, fine.
Yeah.
But my coworkers heard all about it the whole time I had to write it.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm nodding along, and because I'm thinking what you're describing is very similar, that happens in my profession all the time, where we are dealing with situations and we're like, well, wait a minute, we just said the policy was going to be this a month ago, or wait a minute, we just dealt with this student this way, now why are we doing this other way? We need to be consistent, we need to have integrity in our processes so that we're um true. Truth, that's an interesting word that you bring up. So is truth basically about facts, like the sorry, I'm going a little bit on a tangent here, and I didn't tell you ahead of time that I was going in this direction, but you kind of set me up for it. Truth, is it about being factual, you mean, like that, or is there a deeper truth, like just being true to yourself, or being true to your beliefs? Or that's not even a well-formed question, sorry.
Right. I think both definitely exist. For me, like what I value most is like truth, I guess, to the fact. But there is, of course, the aspect of what do you believe to be true? And that actually comes up to in work a lot because, with I work in a scientific field, so there should be like there are truths in science. This is studied, this is tested, this is what we believe. But then there are still parts of it that like, okay, this is the direction that this group is moving, and then there's different theories that haven't been tested, so then it's like, which way do you go? And in some ways it's made me question, like, is truth subjective?
Yeah.
because what it's all about what you believe. And so that's where what's true to me may not be true to someone else,
Yeah.
right? Because what they believe.
Interesting. Interesting.
I know. And it's like it puts me into like this deep like mind circle, because I'm like, I thought truth was supposed to be black and white,
Yeah.
but maybe it's not. Maybe maybe it is for me, but what's black and white to me, what's black to me may be white to you, you know? It
Yeah.
doesn't
Yeah. That's
it doesn't
interesting. Oh
necessarily.
man, I feel like we could unpack that for like a whole hour. We might have to do a separate conversation sometime just about that idea. Um, but let me ask you this. What would you like to use your voice to contribute to the world, or what would you like to use your voice to accomplish?
So I guess let's see if my voice, I think, how can I use it to accomplish things? My goal is to go to medical school first, short-term goal. um, and eventually, obviously, that would mean becoming a physician, hopefully, if I succeed in medical school. I'm very interested in surgery. And so my voice there in a career aspect, I think would be advocating for patients and using that knowledge that I have to kind of guide them, because you don't know what you don't know, and that's why you look to experts in some aspects. um in a career aspect, I think that would be the biggest use of my voice, is using it for to share that knowledge.
Yeah.
And because I eventually will have done that work, using it to provide for other people who don't have that.
Yeah.
uh, in in another aspect, I guess, personally, using my voice in the world, and how do I want to use it to change the world? I don't know that, like, on a grand, like, huge scale, I have plans to do that. Maybe it's funny actually, because I told you that we didn't really talk much politics in my family, but my the doctor who I work for right now says, I could see you becoming the next Surgeon General someday. And I just never like thought that that would be even in the cards for me, like shooting that high. I don't even know if that's something that I would want, but she's put that in my head now, and it's something that I would consider. But okay, personally, I think it doesn't have to be like big grand scheme to necessarily change the world. What I think would change the world the most is really just between two people, and specifically parents and their kids. And I think I am nowhere close to becoming a parent, but that relationship is what would change the world, because that's who we're giving the world to, right? And as long as that's based in love and respect and truth, then that is, I think, the best way that I think I could use my voice, is raising people to take the world with that perspective of treating people with love and respect and speaking the truth.
Yeah. Wow, that's well said. That's
Thank
I told you were going to share wisdom. That was that was great. So let's go. I'm going to go a little bit out of order of where I was going to go. Let's go down that path a little bit further and say, from where you are right now, and I understand you're like, well, I'm not a parent, so I can't pretend that I have all of this figured out. But what would your advice be to parents that are raising kids right now in terms of how do you help kids in a healthy way find their voice, find their identity, express themselves, all of that. What would you say to parents specifically in one of three ways? What would you say to stop doing? What would you say to start doing? Or what would you say to keep doing based off of your observations and your experience?
That is a really hard question, especially not having the perspective of being a parent. You know, I don't have kids.
But I want it specifically from your perspective of someone who just kind of went through that as a kid, you know, and now you're in your adulthood. What and recognizing your friends and your peer group, what are you seeing that maybe really set people free to explore things in a healthy way? What kind of smothered them? What kept people like one of the things when I talk about voice is the idea that each of us kind of has this space in the world to take up, and some people shrink and they don't take up their space, and then other people over, you know, kind of overstep and try to take not only their space but others as well. And so when you're raising kids, you're kind of trying to figure out, hey, I want you to take your space up in the world, like I want you to be you and let the world know who you are, like but at the same time respect the people around you.
Mhm.
What did Okay, maybe not advice, but what are your observations of what you think you see that is healthy and unhealthy in that regard?
Okay. Yeah, because advice, I can't say that this would be the best way to go about it because, you know, I don't have kids of my own. But something to stop, something to start, and something to continue. I think I can only base it off of course, what I've seen and how I
Yeah.
was raised kid, you know, myself 20 something years ago, or maybe as not too far back, 10 years ago, you know, it's 15. So um actually that for some reason just popped into my head. I saw something on Facebook that I had shared that said maybe you weren't a bad person, maybe you were just 15. And I feel like maybe that's just may or may not be me, but you feel like the weight of the world is on your shoulders. And I think to answer the question, something to kind of start doing is being more present and using the time that you have with your children or um, young kids, adults, because like it wasn't just my parents that were influential. I'm very, very close with my aunt, and she was one of my like best friends, and now she's like still a best friend and a mother figure. It's awesome. She's only 15 years older than I am. So, you know, whenever I was 10, she was 25. And so she was like the cool, fun, and but there's community there, I think, and it's important to lean into that and not like let yourself disappear as a parent, because there is that community sometimes. Like, yes, you rely on that community and use them as needed, and you know, have all those different perspectives to show your kid that there's not just one way about it, you know, not just one way to think about this or just solve this problem, or even raising kids. Like that was something that my aunt and my parents did not agree at all on. And so it was like, you can't discipline my kid because we don't parent the same way. And that was always something that it is hard, you know. And I see it now too with my siblings who have kids, and it's like, let's let's focus back on what's important to us: love, respect. And as long as you're coming from a place of love and respect, then it's hard to, I think, mess it up. But the ways that you go about it, I know people just, I don't think they'll ever like agree, but back to the community, like if you're relying on that so much that you're kind of giving up your own I guess presence in that, because my family specifically, like I maybe like withdrew as a teenager a little bit because I was so busy. um and I would, get up for practice at 6 a.m. or something, or sometimes have to be at school at 6 a.m. And then I had whatever after school activities for extracurriculars. And then I had a job that I would work until 10 p.m. And then I had homework until maybe midnight, 1 a.m. And so I didn't take that time. And this was like, from the kids' perspective, but I didn't take the time to really have conversation and bond and be with my family and be present. And so, my parents would ask me like, "Oh, how was work today?" Workish. That was my answer. And I think I wish that they had like probed more. And like obviously that's kind of, not, I was being short with them. Like they probably weren't, I wasn't being very inviting
Yeah.
to probe more,
Mhm.
as a teenager. Not in like I don't want to tell you, but just like because it wasn't what was important, And I think maybe start making that more important than the hustle and bustle of like every day, and being present in life. Like this is life right now, but what is life as a whole, and what
Yeah.
it's us, it's together, it's community.
Yeah. Like this moment here and now.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Yeah, that's really good, because as a parent, I can say I struggle with that with my younger daughter, like it's a 16-year-old, that, you know, how was school today? Or how was this today? Or how was that? Or what's going on with this? And very short answers. And then every now and then, all of a sudden, it'll be like spilling out information. You're like, oh, okay. So trying to navigate that.
There is
Um,
something going.
yeah, yeah. Okay, so I kind of put you on the spot asking you for advice to parents, and you're not a parent, but so this is going to be hopefully a little bit more comfortable because you're just going to speak straight from your experience. So let's start with the school system first. So, in your experience through going through the school system, what what was that like in terms of what helped you and what hindered the process of you finding your voice, establishing your identity, kind of being able to express who you are?
Okay. What helped and hindered my voice in school? So similar, I think, to kind of what we've been talking about, just having that individuality and recognizing that and being present in someone else's life. Like that was kind of a focus for me in high school, where honestly I felt that that was probably something that was lacking. And it maybe because I didn't like feel that I was getting that at home as much, and so I was kind of looking for that in school. And I think there were a lot of my teachers who I knew that I trusted, that I could go to, and like I would probably eat lunch in one of my teachers' rooms like every day. Maybe it was a different teacher, but I'd hop between a couple, and just get to like talk to them. But then I just felt honestly like kind of lonely at sometimes. And so I think that's one thing that maybe, I don't know if it hindered or pushed me to like, because I was feeling like it's like me against the world almost, like if that strengthened my voice, because I'm, sitting alone with my own thoughts, and that's
Hmm.
at the end of the day, who do I have? Me. So maybe it was something that kind of like enforced kind of what I thought for myself. But I think one of the definitely one of the things that helped was having teachers that you could trust, and who were invested in you as a person and not just as a student, but how are you doing personally and not just in school.
Yeah. Yeah. Sometimes when I'm talking to people about this, I bring up this survey. It was called the My Voice survey by the Pearson Foundation. It's a little bit dated now. It's about almost 10 years old. Excuse me. And it was over 56,000 students, grades 6 through 12. So pretty comprehensive. And what they found was that it was 52%. So about half of them said that they felt like their teachers were willing to learn from them, like listen to them as well. And then about half didn't. What was your experience like with that? Do you feel like teachers wanted to learn and listen to you and respect that you had a voice as well, or not so much? And yeah, what was your thought on that? What's your reaction to that, like that survey result?
So in high school, I didn't feel like I like in my classes, I don't think that I necessarily like had to like there's I'm receiving instruction. It's not my place to like, have a voice here. I felt definitely comfortable like asking questions and being like engaged in whatever lesson it was, but um like in a classroom setting, I didn't think that like there was really even a place for my voice necessarily, because just the structure of it, is
Mhm.
I'm receiving this and I'm supposed to do as told, or
Mhm.
whatever, follow these rules in the classroom. But one thing that I would have, I think, would have liked to see a little bit more of is sometimes teachers leaning into like the uncomfortable things, um because you were saying like where where could there have been, I don't know, some maybe improvement. I think a lot of teachers probably listen to your podcast, hopefully, and there was a time in high school where my sister was in the hospital, and I had to be pulled out of school, and I don't know if like teachers really knew the details, but I think some of them did, um, just because it was something that like I might have like have to be out of school for a little while, or
Yeah.
it was a big change, with my sister being in the hospital, and obviously that took like huge toll on my family, so that was the focus there. And then coming back to school, and it's like they knew something was going on, but like nobody addressed it. And I don't know if like that would have been maybe the role of a counselor to then like pull me in and sit,
Mm.
like talk about it or something.
Yeah.
But like I probably wasn't even like that close with the counselor, right? So because
Yeah.
when do you talk to the counselor? Only when something is wrong, maybe, I don't know. But like I talk to my teachers every day, and that would have been, I think, a place to just lean in a little more
Yeah.
and embrace and recognize like, hey, I know that like something's going on, and we're here for you too. I don't know if I'm answering your question.
Yeah.
That's just, I don't know why I thought of that. Something that made me think.
That's actually really good, because if I'm hearing you right, then the practical piece there, like advice to teachers or people who work in schools, is to be okay checking in with a student. Like just be
Mhm.
okay just going ahead and asking the question, like, is there anything you need? Or even I notice this is what's
Mhm.
going on. Um, if you ever need anything, let me know, or I'm here. Like just something that simple.
Mhm.
That's good. That's good to hear. I mean, that's good advice in the whole, like, what would you start doing, stop doing, keep doing, that's good, because there's so many rules about relationships with interactions with students and policies and things like that. So we're still human beings interacting with each other.
Right.
I'm sorry for my voice. I don't know what's going on here. Same question, same idea, but instead of school systems, religious systems. So I don't know what your experience was like. I don't know if you attended churches or other religious systems or faith, what that looked like for you. But in that area growing up, what was that like for you in terms of how did it affect who you came to be or the beliefs you started to form?
Okay, so we talked a little bit about this earlier, just that my parents both had very religious parents, and so that kind of pushed them from making it, I think, a core part of the way we were raised. And so with my dad, so he would say his father is an alcoholic. He would say that his father was addicted to alcohol and his mother's addiction was the church. And so that, to him, I guess he didn't want, I don't know. I don't want to speak for him. But it was never a priority for him to take us to church. And actually hearing him speak at my sister's wedding last year was like the confirmation for me that he does believe in God, because it was part of his speech. And I was like, honestly surprised to hear it. Because it's just not something, and like we used to pray as kids, at night, we had our prayers that we would say with our dad. That, that eventually fizzled out whenever he stopped tucking us into bed every night. But then I was just, I don't know if that's changed, because we also, talk about things change, people change, beliefs change. And then at my mom's house, so my dad would send us to church with his mom, sometimes. And so that was my exposure there until we moved, to this area in third grade. And so my mom also would take us to church, but she never had like a steady, a steady church, a steady place, a community. My mom, also, she, like, my family, I think they were so focused on just like survival and raising the kids and feeding the kids, that there wasn't a lot, I guess, food and shelter. And as long as they had that, then like that's maybe the most that they could do. There wasn't actually, I think, a big enough focus on really raising human people. And so we weren't, I don't think, raised with like this is what our family believes, these are our core values. We value love, respect, truth. Like these are all things that I had to figure out what was important to me later on in life. And I think honestly, it's why my siblings and I, we are all so different, is because we had to figure out on our own what is important to us. And I think, yes, that's everybody. Everybody has to do that, have that discernment of like, where am I gonna fall into the world, this life? But without guidance from our parents, it all ended up in a very different place, because what's important to them wasn't translated, because it almost stopped at like, okay, we fed you and we got you to school, and like they were great at providing for us, and I'm very, very thankful for all that I got to do as a kid and now even. But I wish that they had more, I don't know, had shared more of like what they believe and what they think is important in life. So my mom took us to church, but it was never anything like consistent either. And so then in high school, I was the one like asking my parents, are we gonna go to church this weekend? And there was like, I never asked that at my dad's house because honestly, he, once I had a car, it was like I never even saw them.
Yeah.
And so I could just go do whatever I wanted anyway. But before, when I was like freshman, sophomore age, I would go to church, and I would go to church. Sometimes I'd bring a friend. And this friend, she was also the chaplain of Bluebells. And then we had like a little core group of like 5 of us girls, and it was her and I and another girl who was very vocally agnostic, or I don't think that atheist was like her necessarily, like was her approach to it. But then another girl who also didn't have like a strong faith, and another girl who then ended up like going off the rails in another direction. So it's just like no one had like strong beliefs except for the one agnostic girl. And so then my friend and I, who went to church together, and she was the chaplain of Bluebells, then she started questioning things, which I think is good, because then you really find out what you believe, and not just, and this is like where I know I want to like, the things that I would do differently raising my kids is like, I want them to what I was kind of saying earlier about community and family, like there are different approaches, there are different beliefs, and I want them to know that there are options. Like there's not just one way about this, and you have to decide for yourself what you believe and what is true for you.
Mm-hmm.
And so anyway, church. So my friend who is the chaplain then became agnostic as well, stopped going to church, like left her position, I guess, as chaplain. I don't remember if it was like she just like, I think it was like a conflict for her. She was like, I don't think I can do this anymore. Or if it was like a transition at the end of the year and she just didn't do it again the next year. I don't really remember. But it's funny because people change. And then those 2 girls, the 2 agnostic girls in my little friend circle, they started questioning, what do I believe? Is this really what is true? And now the 2 of them are both Catholic. Like
Oh, really?
completely opposite belief systems. And I think what I've talked to talk to them about, like what changed for them is really figuring out and trying to decide what is true and what makes sense. And it's just, I don't know, funny how, like, if you had asked in high school if like the 3 of us, and it's funny, they both ended up with like people from high school, people that we knew in high school, they both got married this year. And if you had asked like us in high school, if the 3 of us would end up with somebody in high school getting married in a Catholic church, if you put money on it, you'd be the richest person in the world, because nobody would have ever thought. And then, I'm dating somebody from high school and he's Catholic too. So
Yeah.
it's just a funny way that, I don't know, the world works out.
I don't want to probe into your relationship or get personal, so I'm just going to ask a simple yes no question. Do you talk about that, you in your new relationship? Do you talk about faith much, or upbringing, or the differences between like Catholicism and other things?
So we do, because this is like, I didn't see any point in entering the relationship
Yeah.
if that was going to be something that ended it, who knows how far down the road, couple months, couple
Yeah.
years,
Yeah.
ever. And like, I think it's also super important to know what you're getting yourself into, because if this is forever, if we're going to be
Yeah.
raising kids together, then how do we want to do that? And he's Catholic, I'm not.
Yeah.
So that was one of the first, like, on our first date, I asked him, like, would you be open to and okay with marrying someone and raising kids with someone, not just, spending your life, but bringing up other people into the world who with someone who doesn't share necessarily all of the things,
Yeah.
all the beliefs that you do. And that's what I was kind of talking about earlier. I think it's important, and I think it would be a great place, or like a great foundation to raise kids with, between two people who don't agree on everything, because
Hmm.
they, that's one, and it's not like a problem, I think, but it's something that I think a lot of people don't consider, is if we raise our kids telling them what we believe and only what we believe, and they don't have any exposure to any other option out there, then
Hmm.
they don't, and they don't have the choice, the option, the opportunity to find out what they believe themselves. And then that's where you get to be 15, 19, 25 years old, lost in not having that voice of what I do believe, and is this really my belief, or was it something that somebody told me to believe, you
Hmm.
know? And
Yeah. Yeah.
so I think that's like one of the most important things. And that's why I asked him from the get go, is
Yeah.
this something you would be okay with? I do kind of think that, like, that could change. If people change, things change. And like, I think also with time, you figure out, like, okay, yes, this is doable for me, or this is something that I do or don't want. And that can always change. But it is something that we talk about because it's
Yeah.
something that I think is really important.
Yeah. Yeah. Good for you for bringing it up so soon. That's um wow, a couple of different things there. One, I think I totally agree with you that questioning is essential. Like, it's not just a supplemental part to the process, or something that, well, you might question some things here and there stuff. No, it's like essential. It's like it's critical that you go through a questioning process of what you're being taught and what values are being passed down. uh Shameless plug for, no, wait, let's see, by the time this publishes, it'll already, yeah, sorry. I was going to say, one of the episodes coming out, or one of my posts that's coming out soon, is about this idea of questioning and how important it is to that we allow for that to happen. Not only allow it, but encourage it.
Encourage it, yeah.
Yeah. um
Because that's also too, like, I think that's how you get to be so, like, firm in your beliefs, and because you've questioned and you've thought, is this really something that I subscribe to, is this really something that I believe in deep down, like, and without that, you don't have, I think, that strong sense of faith or belief. And honestly, it's something that I still am working on as a 25-year-old, because I didn't have any, like, guidance in that direction or encouragement to question things, because there was never really even the foundation. And
right.
so my whole life it's been like, these are questions that maybe I didn't even know I had, because no one was pushing me to, like, to ask those questions.
Yeah. Yeah.
It was like like ignorance almost, like you don't know what you don't know. And so then whenever, and if it's not important to somebody around you, then you're not going to, without that exposure, it's not going to be important to you. So eventually, coming into like my own, I started asking questions myself. And so still just trying to figure out and navigate that sometimes. And that's something that I don't know if I'll ever get there, it's to have like a very strong faith, but
Yeah.
it was never, I think, on the horizon without those questions.
Yeah. Yeah. One other thing that you made me think of is, I used to do premarital counseling with couples, and we'd go through different topics and things like that. And a lot of times when there came to certain topics, like, how are we going to divide up certain responsibilities, or finances, or religion, in particular, that idea, a lot of times it's easy for young couples to say, well, it's we'll get to it when we get to it, and we'll discuss it later, or that's not really a big issue, we're okay with having the different beliefs and stuff. Which I think, like you said, you can do that. Like, that can be a healthy way that two people can collaborate with each other and stuff, and not believe the same things. But what I would always stress to them is, okay, now let's pretend that you're about to have a kid, because even if you don't think you have strong feelings about it, your parents and other relatives and
Mhm.
your faith community or
Mhm.
whatever, they're going to have strong feelings about it. So you're going to have to make a decision. Are we going to baptize the child? Are we not going to? Are we
Mhm.
going to attend this? Are we going to attend that? Are we, and it just makes it real, like really
Right.
fast. You have to like talk through it in a different way.
Mhm.
So that's really interesting. Um, okay. You have said three words in particular several times during this conversation. So I'm going to come back to those in a second to close us out. But let me ask you this last question then. So in this whole process of what you're talking about now, and we're talking about voice, the idea of, is there such a thing as God's voice? Is there a God? Is there God's voice? Is there divine guidance? And let me just assure you right now, this is me listening. There's no right or wrong answer to this. This is so go ahead. What are your thoughts?
Is there such thing as God's voice?
Yeah, does God speak in some way to people, to you, to in general?
I think for anyone who that is their truth, there is a God, and no matter the nuances of what you believe about God, I think there the point of it all is that guidance, right? And so are you hearing it in your head? Are you seeing signs in, the leaves of the trees or whatever? Maybe that's something that you're looking for and you want to see, but I do think that there is a voice and that that people are looking for, and I do think that it is there. Yes, that God does have a voice and he is pushing everyone into what he would want for us, right? And so whether you hear it or you don't recognize it, maybe, like, just because you don't hear it doesn't mean it's not there, I think. And I think that's something that, like, I have probably been where I've probably existed for so long, just because I haven't had a super strong faith, and it's not like I don't, or maybe even relationship with God. And so where I kind of like am seeing it now is parallels. And I don't know if this is a bad thing to do, but like parallels in mm, the way I live my life and the way that God would want people to live their life, I guess, because what really, like, honestly is pushing me right now towards a relationship with God is um the way that I want to love people. And that's always, always, always been so important to me. But um I I don't want to make this about like boys, but like last year I dated this guy who is just so not receptive of like love, and it made the parallel that I'm drawing here is like the way that God loves people, whether they're receptive of it or not, his like it's doesn't matter to him if you're hearing that voice or if you're going to like to accept that and be open to it. It's just no matter what, there's going to be that love there, and it's how I felt like that I like saw just how I want to love people. It doesn't matter if they're open to it or receptive to it, and it makes it hard. And that's what actually I think is drawing me to God now, is that it is hard to do, and I can like it's just I don't know, an amazing kind of love. I think that even if you don't believe in God, even if you don't hear his voice, that he is there no matter what, because it's hard to do that for us. So the fact that he would do that for everybody is amazing. And I don't know that, like, even if you don't hear it doesn't mean it's not there, I guess.
So to close us out, thank you so much for taking all this time and having a great conversation. You mentioned love, respect, and truth. Those are the three words that I heard multiple times over it. And so what I want to say kind of in closing is I think it's interesting because part of me, like in what you just described in your journey, you were talking about, well, there wasn't really this religious influence necessarily, or there wasn't this direction, or what happened with the group, the girls that were in Bluebells, or your parents and things like that. And yet here you are at 25, and you have landed at love, respect, and truth. Like you have these values, these principles that have risen up to the top. But you arrived there, and I'm not so sure. Like, I guess what I'm saying is I don't doubt that that actually is God speaking and leading you to that place. And sometimes we're wanting God to show up in very structured ways, or very specific ways that we've defined because of our religious structures and things. Not that there's not a time and place for that can be good and productive as well. But my whole point, that's the whole theme. That's the reason this is called Closer Than You Think, is because my conviction is that God is closer than you think most of the time. And we're just not necessarily sensing it in that way. But like love, respect, and truth, those three things, like this is probably true for most world religions. But I can speak to what I know the most about. And that is, if you said, what can we summarize Jesus as? And somebody said, well, love, respect, and truth, you'd be on the money. You know what I mean? Like
Yeah.
that would be right there. So I think through all of that, that you have those themes keep coming up is evidence that of how God is working in different ways. And so this has been great for me. This has been very encouraging to hear you and listen to this, and gives me a lot to process. And I really appreciate it. So thank you for doing this.
Absolutely. Thank you for the invitation.